What's up, guys? We're gonna flow some intake manifolds today and really kind of get an idea of how a factory cylinder head flows. In this video, we're gonna do the intake side. This is a 2020 cylinder head that we've kind of cut up a little bit to see where there's material to remove material when we're porting. I always felt it was pretty interesting to see like flow bench and how it works and everything. So we have pretty much a dial indicator on the valve. These lifters are solid. So we have really light valve springs in them. And then essentially, until I get my little 3D printed piece to actually push down on the valves together, I'm using just a billet piece that evenly pushes down on the valves to open them up. So right now we're at 0 lift. This bench can move enough air to essentially, the industry standard is to flow this at 28 inches of water. It is extremely loud, so when we're doing this, I'm gonna do this now, make sure the exhaust is closed. I'm gonna try to make this as legit of a test as possible. There is a spark plug installed. There's valves on both sides. There's factory 2020 valves. They've never even been removed from this head. We are gonna flow it at 50 thousandths increments to 350 thousandths lift, which is about as much lift as most people are putting in them. They might get 360, 370 maybe-ish lift. Is what most of the camshafts are doing. Problem is most of them are regrinds. You remove a lot of material from the base circle of the camshaft. It does kind of make the valve train a little goofy when that lifter's pumped up really high. But yeah, this is a really nice intake manifold. This is the one that we were running last year. We got a new version that we've been playing with that we're gonna test right after this. So I'm gonna move these valves. Essentially, we're gonna go to 50 thousandths. All right. Flow range. I know that this thing flows less than 100 CFM. So when essentially, I'm gonna move the suction up to the point where we hit 20 inches of water. And then this right here, the top swoop to this gauge essentially is sitting at 0. So at 100 flow range, 40 is essentially 40 CFM. When we move this over to 200 range, this percent, obviously 40 would be 80 CFM. So I'm gonna flow it. It's loud, probably won't be able to hear anything. I'm gonna shut it off after we do this, tell Joey what lift what we're flowing at that lift. He's gonna write it down in our little Excel spreadsheet. I move that over into my computer once we get done with this, and we use that to kind of gauge where we're at as we port stuff. So So 50 thousandths lift was 30 CFM. Let's check it again. 30. Next is 100 lift. 169 CFM. Next is 150 lift. So we were going to be off. It's a little over 100 CFM at 150 lift. I'll move this over to 200 flow range. Back this down a bit. So it's actually 94. So it was kind of weird how that was getting a little goofy up there. We're at below 100 CFM. Let me just go back to 100 real quick. We'll call it 99. I mean, this is as scientific as we can make it. You gotta take everything with a grain, right? Oh. 99. 200 lift. Too far. Right sitting on the edge of 64. So we're at 128. 300. 6.5. So 133. Go 350 lift. Seven and a half. 67 and a half. So 135. You did end it? Are you videoing now? I posted results on Facebook. I forgot to put a spark plug in it. So
it's already on Facebook?
Oh, I just posted a picture showing the port lose flow with lift. But
oh, I understand.
The numbers were higher, and because it was sucking air through the spark plug hole. Kind of stupid on my part, but stuff happens. All right, bolt this bad boy on there. Obviously, I got 6 injectors from my alcohol addiction that I have. Most intake manifolds you see only have the 3 main set, which would be positioned here. This intake manifold, the provision for it is flat there, but the first one does have a little nub on that. And you could see this is actually quite a bit bigger than the hole. Like the actual ID of the runner, the diameter is quite a bit bigger than the diameter of the port. Which, it might look crazy, but I've already flowed this stuff, so I kind of have an idea where we're going to be at. Doesn't really hurt it at all. I'm gonna put in here what I've been working on, just kind of as a teaser, how much airflow we're getting on our port work now. That doesn't necessarily, like, how much CFM we move doesn't, like, the percentage gain doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna gain that kind of horsepower. We're still limited by the airflow of that turbo. So, if we pick up, 30, 40 CFM, we might spool the turbo quicker, the engine makes more power with less pounds of boost, but you still will be somewhat limited by that turbocharger. So, always remember that. It's the flow number. Like if this intake manifold is flowed by itself, it could flow 800 CFM or some ridiculous number. You're still limited by the port and the head. So evenness, there's other things that can create horsepower. 5th cycle pulses inside this thing, it's super dynamic. I mean, you can go on all day about intake manifold design. This intake manifold has worked pretty well for us. We've seen some pretty decent power gains with it. But we're gonna flow this bad boy. All right, let's go back down to normal. Let's bring this back a smidge. That's still closed. Let's bring this back a bit. And let's go to 50 lift. Okay. So we know we went over 100. We're really close to 100 on the 200 range. We're at like 94, 95. On the 100 CFM range, we're closer to 99. 99. I'm just gonna put on a 200 CFM range. It might be a little bit lower on this transition phase, but should be all right. A 94, 95-ish. We'll look at that spot later. But so 120. Five and a half. 68 and a half. So 168 and a half, so 137. $350 left. So 139. So with that plenum, or I should say with that runner design, we're up 1 CFM at 50 thou lift, 3 at that 100. The 150 is kind of that weird area. It shows, I mean, we're down, I guess in comparison, we're up 1 CFM. Because I did 94 CFM when I put it on 200. And then the 200 lift was 120. We're up 4 CFM there. We're up 3 CFM at 250, 4 CFM at 300, and then 4 CFM at 350. So, I guess it just proves that intake, the runner shape of, you know, moves more air. I guess I would never really want like a runner to hurt the flow, I guess, because your constraint is a lot different than the cylinder head. That, you know, the cylinder head's generally the restriction. specifically around the valve area. So I wasn't planning on doing this, but our current cylinder head's moving some freaking air in comparison. So I'm gonna put that cylinder head on there. This intake manifold we've seen, I think we did in that video, was like 4 or 5 horsepower from the intake manifold, something like that. And it, like, since we've had them in the field now for a while, guys notice like an increase in throttle response. The boost, so that was one of the big interesting things. Like, it was really hard to tell on the dyno how fast it spooled. But they noticed no difference, if not, it spooled a little quicker. Like, it made power quicker on the way up. So, I've had some people ask me about that, but yeah, it didn't hurt spool up. Throttle response is better. It makes more power. And it's pretty much repeated on every car we put it on. Like, that intake manifold does need a little bit of a tune revision. Like, it definitely changes the tune a bit. So it leans it out, which is good, means you're making more horsepower. So I'm gonna unbolt this bad boy real quick. I'm gonna bolt the cylinder head that I've been working on. I don't know if I'm completely done with it yet, but this is essentially our race port. The flow results on our stock valve size head do pretty good over what we're seeing here. So get this out of the way. I'm gonna need this intake manifold, so I might as well move it here. But yeah, so the next series, like the next round of videos, are gonna be kind of revolved around the new engine stuff we've been working on and developing. When we were up at 55, 60 pounds of boost, I feel like we had a pretty good handle on like the clutch stuff. We had a pretty repeatable combination. Cost a lot of money in belts, but about 3 runs of belt before like the cords were going everywhere. Just kind of got sketchy. We probably could have cut the cords and then kept rolling with it, but we essentially just, to prevent breakage and carnage, we decided to not run those belts anymore. But our sleeves are working really good. We did notice some issues with the girdle, and we're going to be doing some stuff, some pretty neat stuff in the girdle area. And then obviously Sand Outlaw Series really isn't going to allow a billet block. So the billet block stuff might come down, come down the pipeline, but it won't be for a while. So this is our race port cylinder head, obviously the same thing. I don't necessarily want to put like great detail into all the stuff that's going on over here, but it's a 1 millimeter over valve. This thing has kibble white valves in it right now. We're gonna test some other valves to see how they work. But yeah, 1 millimeter over stuff. I'm gonna test the center port because that's the one I've been focusing on the most. The idea is essentially to make 2 CNC versions of the cylinder heads. The port can get so big that you hurt velocity for like smaller stuff, and they tend to get a little lazy. So we're this is like more of a drag race head, tend to live 9,000 RPM. We got other versions that we're working on that are for smaller turbos, lesser RPMs, I guess. The goal is, the goal for me, especially in like that type of stuff, is to like really make the entire power band better, not just focus on one little area. It's a CVT, so it does kind of tend to live at one spot, but you first have to get the engine up to that RPM. And a lazy car won't flash up there really quick. So it's kind of just laggy on the way up in the RPM range. So, all right, the cylinder head's on it. We'll flip this thing around. I use these same lifters. Obviously, same thing, same exact ordeal, same springs. I'm just going to put this runner on there because we know it moves more air. So I guess to add more detail, if this goes in the video, we 3D printed essentially a cylinder. So this is a 74, it's actually technically a 74 and a half for a 20 over. Our sleeved engines tend to be 20 over. So it's a 74 and a half millimeter bore. It's about the factory stroke and length. It's a little over, it's a little bit different. It's like 3 inches, but it's not that critical. So the bore is pretty important. You kind of want the area that you're sucking on to be the same hole as the factory hole. So if you guys watch this video, this injector angle and the placement of the injector is really close to the valve cover. So if guys do buy this, you want to remove the little clips that hold the injector into the fuel rail and rotate the injector backwards so that it has clearance to not run into that valve cover. So if you just look down this hole, you kind of get an idea of how much bigger the runner in the cylinder head actually is because it matches up. This one. Yeah, I know, super detailed. No light. You guys don't get a light. Not today. All right, we're at 0. For the video, I think I'm just gonna put it at 100 lift, 200 lift, and 300 lift. How about that? I'm gonna do 150 lift and 300 lift. Because right now I gotta move back to the 100. I don't feel like doing it for this. So the flow at 150 lift is 100 CFM. Yep. 300 lift. So what is that, 170, 176? Yeah, so obviously not a humongous difference at 150 lift, but 300 lift, we're up almost 40 CFM in the cylinder head stuff. So I can tell you that 350 lift, this head would benefit from a larger lift. Generally the larger lift would be because that, you have duration to actually get it to that lift and keep it there. But I can tell you that we're at 350 lift, we're well over, well, we're at 40 now. So yeah, we're over 50. I won't tell you exactly how many. So because that cylinder head moves a lot of air at really high lift, then it'd be a benefit to you to run that big of a camshaft. There's really no need to run a humongous camshaft if, in terms of lift, if your cylinder head stops moving air after 300 lift. It's easier on the valve springs. I mean, the only reason you'd ever want that much lift is because you're trying to get the cam to open up to a lift that does move a lot of air. But our cylinder heads that we've ran before, moderate port work and stuff like that, we've made some pretty good horsepower. These new ones though are for like the next level, like, bigger power. So the exhaust is also very important. Combustion chamber shape is really important. We've changed a lot of that stuff. The piston rod combinations that we're working on right now are pretty sweet. We found issues in some areas there that are getting addressed. We'll kind of go over all that stuff when the time comes, but for the time being, you kind of get to see stock cylinder head flow numbers on the intake side at least. We could do the exhaust side if you guys want it. So if you guys put it in the comments that you want to see what the stock exhaust flows versus like a ported head like this, which has quite a bit of work done on it, we could do that. But we're gonna run this series. I'm gonna finish porting this head up, clean it up a little bit. We're gonna assemble this head and put it on the RR with the green on it. So, and we're gonna do it with camshafts. I feel the proper way to do it is actually have cams in it that will show the cylinder head shine. The RR is actually on the dyno right now. I got to do a little bit of work to this head. We'll probably dyno it early next week or something like that. Pull the cylinder head off, put this cylinder head on it with the same camshaft, same cam timing, all that stuff, and dyno it back to back and see what it does. Hopefully it doesn't require that much tune change, but I know that my current RR configuration is pretty much maxed out. I mean, the green's at 28, 29 pounds of boost. It's got the Billet X intake manifold on it. I'm trying to get my hands on an RR exhaust manifold because the exhaust port on this head is bigger than the factory port by a lot. So you have to modify the gasket and then port out the exhaust manifold. It'll be really interesting to see how that all works out. But yeah, stay tuned for that.